Hello and welcome. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mike, and today we're going to be exploring Aristotle and his idea of virtue ethics. In the last video in this series, this Philosophy 101 series, we explored the ideas of Socrates and Plato, focusing on the search for truth via the Socratic method and Plato's theory of forms. So today we're going to shift gears to Aristotle, Plato's most famous student. While Plato emphasized abstract concepts, Aristotle was a much more practical thinker who sought to understand the world through observation and experience. So on today's agenda, there's a few things that we are going to touch on. So first and foremost will be Aristotle's approach to philosophy. And then we will look at the concept of telos, or purpose. And after that, we will explore virtue ethics and the doctrine of the mean. And finally, we will look at the relevance of Aristotle's ethics in the modern world. So Aristotle lived in the 4th century BCE and was a student at Plato's academy. Unlike Plato, Aristotle was much less interested in a separate world of forms and was instead much more focused on understanding the natural world. So there are some key ideas that Aristotle proposed. One of those is emphasis on empirical observation, i.e. that knowledge comes from studying the physical world. Another of those key ideas is Aristotle's rejection of Plato's theory of forms. Aristotle believed that reality is found in individual objects, not in abstract ideals. And the final key idea that we're going to sort of cover is that Aristotle believed that philosophy is a practical guide to living well, rather, or at least it should be. Good philosophy is a practical guide to living well, according to Aristotle. For Aristotle, philosophy is not just about abstract ideas. It's about answering questions like, what is a good life and how can we achieve it? Do you think do you think philosophy should focus on abstract ideas like Plato's forms, or practical concerns like Aristotle's ethics, and why? Now, this is a more complicated question than it seems on the surface, because there is something to be learned from both, right? So with Plato's forms, even if the idea of this sort of non-physical realm turns out to not be true, there is some kind of conceptual realm that exists in the mind of human beings, the realm of ideas. It's like internal thing rather than external. So for Plato, it was external. But you can sort of take that idea and internalize it in the sense that there is a perfect version of a triangle that lives in your mind, or there's a perfect version of a chair that lives in your mind, and so on and so forth. And there is something that we can learn from that. But at the same time, the practical concerns must be addressed, because those are the things that actually determine how and why we live the way we do. So I personally am actually undecided on this subject. I think I lean towards the practical concerns like Aristotle, but at the same time I don't completely disregard the focus on abstract ideas. I think they both both have their place. So it's actually a much more complicated question than it sounds. So jump in the comments with your own opinion on that. Don't go wild. We're not looking for a dissertation. We don't want an essay. Nobody's going to read that. Well, I will, but I mean, other people are likely not to. So keep it a couple of paragraphs at the most. Just express the idea in a as succinct a way as you possibly can. And remember, this is just an opinion. There's no right or wrong answer to this question. So jump in the comments with that. Pause the video, obviously, because you don't want to miss what comes next. A central idea in Aristotle's philosophy is telos, or purpose. So he believed that everything in the world has a purpose or an end goal. A knife's telos is to cut. A seed's telos is to grow into a plant. A human's telos is to achieve eudaimonia, which is a Greek word, and it translates not directly into English very well, but it translates roughly to like human flourishing. So that could also be interpreted as sort of happiness and contentness and so on. So that's why we use the word eudaimonia, because the English versions of it don't quite capture the essence of what Aristotle was getting at, but nonetheless, according to Aristotle, a human's telos is, or purpose, is to achieve a state of eudaimonia, flourishing or happiness. So for Aristotle, living well means fulfilling your purpose as a human being. But how do we do that? Well, Aristotle would say by cultivating values. Unlike utilitarianism, which focuses on consequences, or deontology, which focuses on rules, virtue ethics focuses on character. Aristotle believed that being a good person means developing virtues, positive traits or habits that lead to a flourishing life. So at its most basic, Aristotle's virtue ethics consists of focusing on character and habits, the idea that virtues are developed through practice and education, and that the idea of the eudaimonia, or happiness or human flourishing, is achieved by living virtuously. Aristotle argued that virtue lies between two extremes, excess and deficiency, and this idea is called the doctrine of the mean. So to sort of illustrate that idea in a way that's not just nonsensical word salad, let's sort of come up with some examples, right? So courage is, according to Aristotle, the mean between recklessness, excess, and cowardice, deficiency. Generosity is the mean between wastefulness, excess, and stinginess, deficiency. Patience is the mean between apathy, excess, and impatience, deficiency. So at this point, to further illustrate that idea of the doctrine of the mean, it's a good idea at this point to think of one yourself. So think of a virtue that you admire. What are the extremes that it balances itself between? So write that down in the comments and share with us all. Pause the video to do that. Don't overthink it. Just identify a virtue that you admire in some capacity, whether it's a virtue that you hold or a virtue that you believe other people do. Doesn't really matter. Just pick a virtue that you admire and let us know what the extremes are that it balances between. So pause the video, go and do that. and then come back. So according to Aristotle, virtues aren't innate; they are cultivated through habit. Aristotle believed that we become virtuous by practicing virtuous actions, just as we become skilled at playing an instrument through practice. Do you agree that practicing virtues can make someone a better person? And can someone fake being virtuous? Well, those questions I want you to answer in the comments. So, do you agree that practicing virtues can make someone a better person? Can somebody fake being virtuous? Jump in the comments with your response to those questions. I look forward to reading them. Pause the video to do that, and then come right back. Aristotle's virtue ethics remains really quite influential today, especially in areas like education and leadership and personal development. So we can look at some of those modern applications of virtue ethics. So in education, we see that applied when students are encouraged to develop traits like curiosity, resilience, kindness, respect, and so on. We see it applied in leadership when the focus is on integrity, courage, and humility. And we also see the application of virtue ethics in self-improvement, pursuing balance and moderation in daily life. So now I have a little exercise for you. And I just want you to think about somebody that you admire, whether that's a mentor, a public figure, a friend, a relative, whatever. It doesn't really matter who they are. Just all that matters is that they are a person that you admire in some capacity. So what virtues does that person embody, and how do those virtues make them flourish? Write a sentence or two in the comments to answer that question. Tell us who you admire, what they are to you, what their relation to you is, whether they're a mentor, a public figure, a friend, a relative, whatever. And tell us what virtues they embody and how do these virtues make them flourish? How do they achieve a state of eudaimonia as a result of living those virtues? Pause the video and then come right back. We are nearly at the end, I promise. Aristotle's virtue ethics teaches us that a good life isn't about following rigid rules or maximizing outcomes. It's about developing character and living in balance. In a world filled with extremes, his emphasis on the doctrine of the mean is as relevant as ever. And we see this idea played out in all manner of different things, all manner of different sort of fields of human endeavor. We see it played out in religion. So Christianity actually, in some capacity, utilizes this idea. Buddhism, to some extent too, or they have a similar idea anyway. And so on. So it's around us all the time. It's embedded in our politics, our social structures, and culture in general. So it is something that is, as I said before, every bit as relevant now as it was 2,500 years ago when it was written. So before we part ways, I do have one final thing to ask of you. Well, maybe not final, but I do have one more thing to ask of you. And that is to write a paragraph or two to answer this question. what is one virtue that you want to cultivate in your life, and how will you practice it? So write a paragraph or two answering that question. What is one virtue that you want to cultivate in your life, and how will you practice it? Put that in the comments, and make sure you go and read other people's responses too, because there might be a spark of inspiration for you embedded in someone else's thoughts. So go and have a look at those as well. So that's it for today's exploration of virtue ethics. We have looked at it in a bit more depth than we did in the previous visit of these ideas. So hopefully now you have a better understanding of Aristotle's virtue ethics and how it fits into the world in which you live. And in the next video, we're going to move forward in time quite considerably to modern thinkers like René Descartes and John Locke, who shifted the focus to reason and experience. So I look forward to seeing you on that one. But before I go, this really is the final thing that I'm going to ask you, I promise, for this video anyway. And that is, could you like the video and subscribe to the channel? When you do so, YouTube will obviously show you more of my content, which is wonderful, and I really appreciate that. But more importantly, YouTube will recognize that you are keenly interested in philosophy, and it will start to show you other people talking about these ideas and other ideas of philosophy, which in turn will only serve to deepen your knowledge and widen your perspective, and just generally create a much more realistic picture of the world in which you live. So there is enormous benefit to that, because you get exposure to all of these ideas, and all of that in turn helps you to construct your own worldview in a way that suits you in your life. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you.